All right, so today we're going to go ahead and continue our conversation about imperialism. Now, to go ahead and recap what we learned yesterday, we talked about the Spanish-American War, and we talked about how McKinley fought this war to drive the Spanish out of Cuba. We talked about the reasons for imperialism being like jingoism, yellow press again, the sinking of the USS Maine. And we talked about how McKinley kind of betrayed the Philippine Americans, the Filipinos, with the Treaty of Paris. And so, because of what's happened so far, we've expanded this empire all the way out to the Philippines. Has McKinley done a fairly good job establishing an empire here? I would say so. He has islands in the Pacific Ocean. He also has islands here in the Atlantic. I mean, we have a trans-oceanic empire here. And so McKinley has done pretty well for himself thus far. Well, McKinley's not going to live forever, because what's going to happen to McKinley? He's going to get assassinated. So McKinley, you don't have to write this down, but McKinley was eventually assassinated by Leo Czolgosz. He's shot, and he dies, and he's replaced by who? Teddy Roosevelt. So let's do a placeholder. Teddy Roosevelt becomes the next president of the United States. As many of you know, let's talk about his foreign policy. We already know Teddy Roosevelt as being a what? We know he's president. What kind of things did he did domestically? He was a trust buster. He did the Meat Inspection Act. We already know stuff about him, but that was his domestic policies. Now we're going to talk about his foreign policies. Good so far? You should also know that Teddy Roosevelt wins re-election, but that's not that important. So, when we talk about foreign policy today, I want you to really think about two things. One, what is the president's goal in pursuing foreign policy? What do we hope to gain through foreign policy? And two, are we succeeding in meeting that goal? The reason why it's important to ask this question is so we know if the president was successful or not. I'll give an example. Let's say my goal was to be a teacher that spread a love of mathematics. How successful am I at meeting my goal? Not very, right? I'm a teacher, so that's good. But am I spreading my love of mathematics? No, I'm teaching history instead. So again, that is a question of whether or not I met my goal. What if again, the same goal, but what if I was working at Starbucks? Have I met my goal less this time? Yes. So again, there are degrees of success, and that's really what I want you guys to take a look at in this section is you have three different presidents that we're going to look at in their foreign policies. What you have to ask yourself is to what extent was one more successful than the other? Does that make sense? So if we can compare them, you need to know, was this guy more successful or was this guy more successful at meeting their goal? So, let's move forward today. Teddy Roosevelt's foreign policy was big stick diplomacy. Big stick diplomacy was an aggressive foreign policy, a very aggressive foreign policy that promoted military intervention. So big stick diplomacy was an aggressive foreign policy that promoted military intervention and intimidation. So again, big stick diplomacy was an aggressive foreign policy that promoted military intervention and intimidation. Teddy Roosevelt perceived it as being the police. But the idea, really, in practice, was that we were using the military for intervention and intimidation. So this is called big stick diplomacy. Here's why. Teddy Roosevelt was inspired by the African proverb that read, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." What that means is this. Let's say I walked into a bank and I wanted to rob it, but I have no guns on me. I say, "Hey, give me your money." Is anyone going to take me seriously? I'm going to speak louder. "Give me your money! Why won't you give me your money?" But no one's going to take me seriously because I don't have a stick. But if I walk into that bank the next day with a shotgun, I just go, shh, shh. Everyone quiets down. I just say, hey, give me your money. Are people going to give me their money? Yes, because now I have a big stick. The idea behind Teddy Roosevelt's foreign policy is, rather than trying to scream and try to, tell people what to do, all we have to do is carry a big stick, and will people do what we want? What is Teddy Roosevelt's big stick in this case? The military. And specifically, what is he going to use? The Great White Fleet, the U.S. Navy. So big stick diplomacy was Teddy Roosevelt using the Great White Fleet, or the U.S. Navy, to get what we wanted. Because rather than signing treaties and negotiating, what's easier? Pulling up my Navy to your shores and say, hey, we're going to build wells here, okay? No debate, because the ships are parked on your shore. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, speak softly and carry a big stick. That is his foreign policy. So let's take a look at what this looks like in practice. First use of big stick diplomacy is the Panama Canal. Here's the thing, folks. The reason why we wanted a Panama Canal is this. During the Spanish-American War, in what two areas did we fight? The Philippines and Cuba, right? Well, the Philippines is way over here. And Cuba is way over here. Here's the problem. Here's America. Here's Mexico. Here's South America. Okay? This is how I draw continents. Anyway, if half our Navy is here and half our Navy is here, and we want to combine our Navy, let's say, to fight a war, how are they going to be able to join up? They have to sail all the way down from South America and then up again, right? Is that going to take way too long? And it did take way too long. So Teddy Roosevelt realized in order for us to be a strong military power, we're going to have to cut this down in time. What if there's a serious war happening? So he said, I know what we'll do. We'll build a canal. Right in this area right here. Because would you build a canal right through here? No, that's too long. You would find the narrowest strip of land to build your canal. And also, once you have the ability to travel through this little canal, what else can pass through there besides our Navy? Trade ships. Which today, Panama Canal is one of the busiest in the world. So, here's the Panama territory, folks. This is what is known as the Isthmus of Panama. For those of you geographically inclined, what's an isthmus? Anyone? Strip of land that is surrounded by two bodies of water. The narrow strip of land surrounded by two bodies of water. That's an isthmus. You guys took geography in 6th grade, right? Anyway, this was on a test at some point in your life, I imagine. Anyway, we want to build a canal in the Isthmus of Panama. Here's the problem. At the time, the Isthmus of Panama was controlled by who? Colombia. So America asked Colombia if we could build a canal. What did Colombia say? Nope. No, you cannot build that canal. So is America the type of country that says, oh, we can't, okay, and then they just left? No. Is that what we did? No. Colombia refuses to let us build a canal. So America does instead is we go up to Panama and say, hey, Panama, do you like being owned by Colombia? They're like, no, it's terrible. Hey, why don't you guys declare independence? We got your back. I mean, Colombia is such a terrible government. Why don't you declare independence and we'll support you? Panama's like, okay. So Panama declares independence with U.S. support. Now here's the thing. Is Colombia just going to let Panama declare independence? No. Are they just going to let them leave? No, obviously not. So here's what American support looks like. America sends the U.S. Navy and just parks it alongside Colombia's coast. Now we're not attacking them, but we just decide to sail the U.S. Navy along Colombia's coast and say, hey, Colombia, our friend Panama is going to declare independence. So we hope you're cool with that. We're not saying we're going to attack you, but we're not saying we're not going to attack you. So we're just going to go ahead and put our ships right here, and our friend's going to leave. Is that okay? And Panama declares independence, and can Colombia do anything about it? Not at all. And so because of that, Panama has a bloodless revolution. And now they're independent. And Panama says, wow, America, thank you so much. That is, wow, we're independent now. America's like, hey, no problem, man. I mean, I'm just proud of you. And Panama says, well, is there anything we could do for you? And America says, I don't think so. Actually, it's the top of my head. I mean, if you're okay with it, we would love it if we could build a canal in your narrow strip of land. And they're like, yeah, that seems fair. You helped us declare independence. And that's how we got the Panama Canal. We do feel bad, 40 years later, so we pay Colombia $50 million. We're like, hey, yeah, remember the time when we stole Panama from you? Yeah, our bad. We feel so bad, so here's $50 million. The Panama Canal generates billions of dollars a year. Billions of dollars a year. But we felt bad, so we paid them $50 million. But anyway, that's how we got the Panama Canal. Make sense to everyone so far? Dastardly we are. This is kind of how it looks like in cartoon form. Colombia, we're going to take Panama, okay? I mean, we can fight for it if you want. But it's your choice. In any case, here are the 3 treaties that lead up to the Panama Canal. You need to know the exact treaties. The first treaty you need to know is the Clayton-Bulwer Treaty. The Clayton-Bulwer Treaty said that the U.S. and Great Britain must jointly build canals together. The Clayton-Bulwer Treaty said the U.S. and Great Britain must jointly build canals together. Yeah, in the cabinet right there. It's a lot. Must jointly build canals together. Because, folks, the basic idea... Which one is your textbook? For this class? They're there. I would hope you know what your textbook looks like. All right. So, the Clayton-Bulwer Treaty said that they must build canals together. The reason why is that England did not want America to have a monopoly on canals. So they had to build them together. Does that make sense? Otherwise, America was like, oh, you can't use our canal anymore. So they wanted to jointly build it. But in 1901, in the Hay-Pauncefote Treaty, America was allowed to build canals alone. The U.S. could build canals alone. England just said, you know what, screw it. We don't really care anymore about canals. So in the Hay-Pauncefote Treaty, America could build canals alone. But England will build another canal later. What canal do they build? Shoot, what is the name of that canal? Oh, the Suez Canal. Erie Canal? No, that's not right. They built the Suez Canal in Egypt much later. The third treaty then, the Hay-Bunau-Varilla Treaty. What the Hay-Bunau-Varilla Treaty says is that Panama lets America build a canal. Panama lets America build the Panama Canal specifically. Panama lets America build the Panama Canal. That's the Hay-Bunau-Varilla Treaty. Technically, we leased the Panama Canal for 99 years. We got it, we built it, and we used it for 99 years. And then we had to give it back after 99 years. So it was like a lease. So we rented it for 99 years. And then now Panama controls the Panama Canal again. But for 99 years, it was run, operated, and all the profits went to the United States. We hired Panamanians, but it was ours. And then after 99 years, we gave it back to them. They say people that use the Panama Canal now miss America's ownership of the Panama Canal. because they just say America was much better at using the Panama Canal or operating it. Has anyone here been to the Panama Canal before? Well, I have. So the Panama Canal is actually a pretty amazing feat of ingenuity. The way it works is this, folks. The Pacific Ocean and Atlantic Ocean are connected by the Panama Canal. But the problem is, to connect them, you have to go over this mountain range. And they couldn't just cut right through evenly. So what they did is they created a series of locks. So here's how the Panama Canal works. Your ship enters the Panama Canal here, and it enters a lock. And what happens in the lock is they close the gate on both sides, and they fill it up with water. And your ship rises, and once it's level with the next lock, they open the gate, you move in, they close the gates, they fill it up with water until it's level, then they move in, close the gates, fill it up with water, close the gates, fill it up. You sail all the way across Gatton Lake, and you enter a lock, they take the water out, they open the door, you sail across, they close the lock, they move you across, close the lock, move you across. It's pretty brilliant, folks, because you enter this, pretty much this room, with no ceiling, and then they put you in there, they close both doors, and then they start flooding it with water, and your ship slowly rises. And when your ship is on par with the next section, they open that gate, and your ship just moves across. You go in, you get locked back in, and they raise it up again, they move you across, and then eventually they lower you down, they lower you down, they lower you down. It's a very slow process. Very slow process. To get across just through the locks, depending on what kind of ship you have, I was just on a passenger ship. It was like a small passenger ship. It would take about 16 hours to get all the way across. Because you have to keep in mind, folks, you have to flood it until it raises the ship up, and the heavier your ship, the more water you'll need, right? And because it displaces the water. In any case, folks, much larger ships take much longer times. Some ships might take like 2 days, 2-3 days to get all the way across. They are building, they're actually expanding the Panama Canal today to accommodate like those larger container ships. So they've grown the Panama Canal significantly in the last few years, last several decades actually, but the lock that I went into was designed for smaller passenger ships like cruise ships and whatever else. But it is pretty neat. Like you'll be in one of the locks and you'll be pretty much assuming that you're in this giant cage and the ground level is like maybe the top of this building, and then after 45 minutes you'll slowly be level with the ground. And then you'll move all the way across to the next lock. It's kind of a trip. Like you'll be looking up, and then when you don't pay attention, you're having a drink, you're talking to your friends, and you look around later, and the people you're looking up at right now are like eye level. So after 40 minutes, they'll raise you up, and you move on to the next lock. It's cool. I touched it. Canal. I did it. I highly recommend going through the Panama Canal. It's interesting. It's very ingenious and awesome that they did that back in 1901. But it is long, so I would recommend maybe only doing a half tour. Because the problem is, my hotel was here. So if I took the Panama Canal all the way around, I'm like, oh no, then you could take a train all the way back. That's how people do it. You take a train all the way back to the other coast. So it's cool though. I recommend it. It's pretty neat. Is it dangerous? No. Parts of Panama City are dangerous, but it's like every other city. Parts of LA are dangerous. Anyway, folks, the cartoon suggests here's Teddy Roosevelt cracking the egg of Columbia. Panama is born, and Panama is giving Teddy Roosevelt a gift of the Panama Canal. So that's what's suggested there. Here's Teddy Roosevelt helping to dig that canal because why not? Actually, he did help build that canal. He physically went to Panama to help build the canal. Here's him operating a steam shovel when building the Panama Canal because, of course, he did that. Here he is taking all the dirt that they're using to build the Panama Canal and tossing it on top of Columbia. Almost as like an insult. Like, there you go, Columbia. You can have all the dirt that we don't want. Next up on the Big Stick Diplomacy agenda is the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. So yes, we had the Panama Canal. Next up we have the Roosevelt Corollary. A corollary, folks, means an extension. It just means an extension of. So the Roosevelt Corollary was an extension to the Monroe Doctrine. And what it said was that the U.S. may intervene in Latin America The U.S. may intervene at Latin America at any time. The U.S. may intervene in Latin America at any time. The U.S. may intervene in Latin America at any time to prevent European intervention. To prevent European intervention. Here's why. Let's say Colombia owed England money, and Colombia did not want to pay. What might England do? Might they attack Colombia to get their money back? But does America want England or European powers to come to Latin America? No. So what Teddy Roosevelt said was, whoa, we don't want Europe intervening in Latin America. We'll intervene for you. And so what ends up happening is Teddy Roosevelt says, America will handle all the problems of Latin America. If they owe you money, we'll collect it. If there's problems, we'll deal with it. We don't want Europe here. So pretty much America serves almost like a debt collector. Because they don't want Europe in Latin America. Hey, England, you want your money? We'll get it for you. We don't want you coming over here. But did the Latin Americans like this? No. Mexico or Colombia would have rather gone to war than pay England. That's what they were hoping for. Like, yeah, you want us to pay you? We're not going to. Why don't you come and take it? But America instead comes in, sends in the U.S. Navy and says, we're actually going to take that money. We don't want you going to war. And so does America have any right to actually tell the Latin American countries what they can and can't do? No. But we said we did. And that's what the Roosevelt Corollary is. That we can intervene in your country whenever we want, but keep in mind, folks, we thought we were doing it for them. We're helping you with our military. No, you're doing the wrong things. We're here just to make sure you do the right things. Now, we're the policeman. We just want to make sure that things are going well in Latin America. Questions there? Roosevelt Corollary. U.S. has the right to intervene in Latin America. So here we are pretty much throwing our hat in South America saying, this is ours. You can't have it, Europe. This is ours now. Again, this idea of jingoism, America's empire now extends from the Philippines all the way through Panama and South America, saying we have influence over all. So let's talk about now Roosevelt in East Asia. So not only is he involved in Latin America, but big stick diplomacy extends all the way to Asia, where Teddy Roosevelt will get involved with his big stick diplomacy. Well, Roosevelt's first instance of involvement is the Russo-Japanese War, in which Roosevelt ends the Russo-Japanese War. Roosevelt ends the Russo-Japanese War by forcing Russia and Japan to sign the Treaty of Portsmouth. So again, he ends the Russo-Japanese War by forcing Russia and Japan to sign the Treaty of Portsmouth. How does he do that? By saying, hey, Russia, if you don't sign this treaty, I'm going to use my navy and attack you. And Japan, if you don't sign this treaty, I'm going to use my navy and attack you. So again, he ends the Russo-Japanese War by forcing Russia and Japan to sign the Treaty of Portsmouth. In doing so, he wins a Nobel Peace Prize by ending a war. Probably the only time the Nobel Peace Prize is awarded to someone who gained peace by threatening war. But he got what he wanted. Hey, if you don't end this war, I'm going to go to war with you. So sometimes violence is the answer. See? Apparently. So he wins a Nobel Peace Prize for that. And again, is it any of his business to be involved in Russia or Japan? No, but he's like, I don't like this. I'm going to get involved. By the way, I like to note, look at the height difference between the Japanese and the Russians. Here's Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, that Russian guy can barely fit through that door. He has to duck. Look at the door. Crazy. Another instance of them getting involved is when America sent the Great White Fleet around the world to Japan. The U.S. sent the Great White Fleet around the world and to Japan. Why might we have done this? Why are we going to sail our Great White Fleet around the world? To show off. Not just to show off, to do what? To intimidate. Like, you know those guys that wear like guns on their hips? Like, why do they do that? It's not like an accessory. It's like, oh, it matches my earrings. No, it's because it's intimidation. And so the idea is to make sure that we intimidate Japan. We intimidate other countries saying, hey, don't mess with us. We have this amazing fleet, called the Great White Fleet. Because once people know the size of America's Navy, are they going to be intimidated by it? Are they going to give America what they want? Sure. Let's say I really want something at McDonald's. No, I'll brandish my weapon at McDonald's like, oh, don't mess with that guy. Give him his McNuggets. He's dangerous. But that's the idea behind the Great White Fleet. We brandish our Navy. Here's the interesting thing, though. Because America sent the Great White Fleet to Japan, Japan realized how far behind they were, and what did they start to do? They started to industrialize and imperialize, which made them the Japan that they were in World War II. If America never sent the Great White Fleet to Japan, many people would argue that Japan would have not been prepared and would have never fought World War II. But because we showed them how far behind they were, remember that sense of global competition? Yeah. Eat or be eaten? Japan felt that way because of America. And now Japan's like, oh my gosh, they have steel ships. We have like small wooden ironclad ships. We're not going to be able to survive in this world. We need to industrialize. And because of that, Japan began to become a more aggressive military power, and that's why they became the empire that they were preceding World War II. We did that. Interestingly enough. Third thing dealing with Japan. Gentlemen's agreement. Here's what happened, folks. Is America racist? Yeah, unfortunately, we are. We have periods of really bad racism. And one of those was in 1907. Here's what happened. The San Francisco Unified School District discriminated against Japanese Americans. So the San Francisco Unified School District was discriminating Japanese Americans. Discriminating against Japanese Americans. Pretty much like denying them classes, not letting them enter schools, that kind of stuff. So again, the San Francisco Unified School District was denying Japanese Americans or discriminating Japanese Americans because they had this sentimentality saying things like, Japs keep moving, this is a white man's neighborhood. Some pretty racist stuff. And can you imagine if you were buying a house back then and someone had that on their lawn? You're like, this doesn't seem like a very friendly neighborhood. Even if you're like Caucasian, would you want to see that? Like, this is my kind of neighborhood. Whites only. Like that just seems, I don't know, off-putting. But anyway, so is Japan happy about that? Like, you are mistreating our former citizens and their descendants. We don't like that. Japan might go to war with America over San Francisco. Does Teddy Roosevelt want that? No. So Teddy Roosevelt agrees to the gentleman's agreement, and here's what's promised. In the gentleman's agreement, Teddy Roosevelt promises to protect Japanese American rights in San Francisco, pretty much giving them access to what? School, education, that kind of thing. He promises to protect Japanese American rights if Japan promises to limit immigration to America, to limit immigration to the U.S. What they're saying is that the reason why people are angry is because job competition, housing competition, that kind of thing. So he says, maybe if you can limit immigration to the U.S., there wouldn't be as much conflict. Well, it's kind of, but we're not banning all of them. We're saying reduce the immigration. And we're not even saying we're going to reduce it. We're just asking you to reduce it. Don't let as many people leave your country at a time. we're not doing it on our end. We're not saying a new policy saying, no fewer Japanese here. We're saying we ask that you limit the immigration of Japanese from your country into ours. Does that make sense? Because we didn't want to be responsible for it because Teddy Roosevelt was doing his part. And technically, this is not an official agreement. This is not passed by Congress. This is the president saying, I will protect these people if you do that. But does this hold up once Teddy Roosevelt leaves office? No. So it's a gentleman's agreement. It's not an actual law. Make sense? Take an agreement between leaders. We do this today. It's called executive agreements. They only last until the president is still in power. And then when he leaves, the other president can choose to either keep that agreement or not. The other thing dealing with Japan is the Root Takahira Agreement. The Root Takahira Agreement was between Japan and America also. And this was an agreement to recognize or respect each other's empires. The purpose was to recognize and respect each other's empires. So specifically, we were just warning Japan not to try to take over what? The Philippines. Because Japan was not very happy about us winning the Philippines or Hawaii. So the Root Takahira Agreement asked us to respect and recognize each other's empires. To recognize and respect each other's empires. This is mine. You don't get to have it. We got to it first. But you can have like Korea and the Sakhalin Islands and Hong Kong and Taiwan and whatever else. But we recognize that once you take it over, it's yours. Once it's ours, and we respect that. The other thing you should know then about the Japanese, a lot of Japanese stuff today. The Lodge Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. The Lodge Corollary, passed by this guy, Henry Cabot Lodge. The Lodge Corollary said that non-Europeans, also may not intervene in Latin America. Non-Europeans also may not intervene in Latin America. Non-Europeans also may not intervene in Latin America. Because who already can't intervene in Latin America? Europe. But who was trying to intervene in Latin America? Japan. Here's what happened here. Mexico was trying to sell Baja California to Japan. Can you imagine if Baja California was owned by Japan? Like, we'd have animation movies and Dragon Ball in America like 10 years before I got here. But anyway, Mexico tried to sell Baja California to Japan because they needed the money. And does Mexico have the right to do that? And does Japan have the right to buy it? Sure. But America said, whoa, no, you can't do that. You are not allowed to sell that land. Mexico, you're not allowed. And so America told Mexico and Japan they could not go forward with the transaction. Did they have any business telling them to do that? No. But that happened. So anyway, folks, America getting involved again. Would you argue that Teddy Roosevelt's foreign policy could be described also as a bad neighbor policy? That we were like that bully on the block that just told the neighbors what to do? Like, can you imagine if you were like you want to plant an orange tree in your backyard, and then you went to Home Depot and you bought it, and you pulled up, and you're about to take it out of your car, and your neighbor walks up to your house, pounds on the door, and says, like, can I help you? Like, yeah! Are you putting an orange tree in your backyard? I'm like, yes. No! No! You think I want to wake up every morning and smelling citrus? No, I don't want that. Don't you dare put an orange tree in your backyard. Your response would be, who are you? I'm the guy that lives down the street. Okay? And if you want to put up an orange tree, you got to go through me first. You got it? That's the kind of guy that he is. And he pulls up his shirt and he has like a gun there. You're like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't want any trouble. Or like, let's say, you were trying to sell your lawnmower to the guy down in the other neighborhood. Like, no! You do not sell lawnmowers to people in the other neighborhood. That is not how we do it. If you're going to sell something, you ask me first. And I'll tell you if you can sell your lawnmower to the guy in the other neighborhood. But that's what America's doing. We're being the crazy neighbor that's telling everyone what they can and can't do. That's why the Latin Americans described us as being a bad neighbor. Anywho, that's Teddy Roosevelt. But again, under Teddy Roosevelt, it's like America's gliding through, righting the world however we see fit. America seems to be enjoying it.
Who's in the background?
The horse. Oh, that's Russia, France, England. They're pretty upset that they're not able to ride the world as much as we are. Anyway, election 1908. Who becomes president? 1908. Taft. And now you have the 27th president of the United States, Taft. Now, Taft was handpicked by Teddy Roosevelt, right? And just like Taft was supposed to carry on Teddy Roosevelt's progressive agenda, was there an expectation he was also going to carry on his foreign policy agenda? Yes. So if you look at this cartoon again, here's Teddy Roosevelt giving his policies to Taft, and there's that big stick that he expects Taft to wield as well. Make sense? Okay. So Teddy Roosevelt expects Taft to carry on the same foreign policy agenda. But is Taft the same guy as Teddy Roosevelt? No. I mean, is he like the same kind of cowboy, outdoorsman kind of guy? Does he seem like a guy that likes military intervention? No, not so much. So Taft decides, I don't think I'm going to go the route of big stick diplomacy. Instead, Taft introduces dollar diplomacy. Dollar diplomacy. And the idea behind dollar diplomacy was that Taft wanted to avoid military intervention. Taft wanted to avoid military intervention because intervening using your military to get what you want is just ends up making what? Enemies, right? People don't like you. So he says, I don't think this is the most useful foreign policy. He wanted to avoid military intervention, and instead, he wanted to create influence through financial investments in Latin America. He wanted to create influence through financial investments in Latin America. Because let's say you have a poor country. If I financially invest in your country and I give you $100 million and I just invest in, let's say, coal mines, and I invest in, banana farms, and I invest in, like peanut butter factories in your country, is that going to create jobs? Definitely. And are you going to be happy with me as a country? I gave you $100 million. And so might you be thankful for that investment? And then I could say, hey, Colombia, I just gave you $100 million. It'd be great if you could do this. Would they be more willing to say yes to those kinds of requests? Probably. And here's the nice part also. What if they don't do what you want? What else can you do now? You can take the money back. And you can say, hey, Colombia, it'd be great if you, let us build the oil well here. They'll say no. Oh, you don't want to? Okay, then we're going to go ahead and take all those jobs that we created, and we're going to move that over to Panama. Now, might Colombia change their mind? And so we don't have to use force. We use agreements and treaties and contracts to influence, and he thought this is a much better way to do it. And also, by improving the economies of these countries, how does the U.S. benefit? We can trade with them. So let's say, we really like bananas. Well, we can now open up banana farms in Panama, and all of a sudden, that's where all our cheap bananas come from. And they're going to get us. Are they going to be willing to sell it to us for cheap? Because it was our money. So Taft decided the pen is mightier than the big stick. The pen is mightier than the big stick. Because you could bully people around, or you could sign contracts and agreements. And what is being suggested by this cartoon? Who's happy? Everyone. Who's everyone? Workers, labor, farmers, miners. Aren't they all happy about this? Like, hey, you're investing in our country. You're not forcing us to do anything. Now, could we force them to do whatever we wanted? Sure. But at least we're financially investing. And so does this seem like a much better way than intervening militarily? Sure. Here's the problem. Unfortunately, the United States is forced to intervene militarily under Taft in Nicaragua, Honduras, and the Dominican Republic. So again, unfortunately, despite Taft's desire not to intervene, we are forced to in Nicaragua, Honduras, and Dominican. Pretty good. Why? Why do we have to intervene militarily in these three countries that we have so heavily invested financially in? To protect our investments. If we invested, let's say, millions and millions of dollars in these three countries, and then there's a civil war, what might happen?
It'll be destroyed.
Yeah, all of our stuff might be destroyed. If we just spent $50 million on that factory, and they're going to burn it to the ground? I don't think so. So because we're so heavily invested, we were forced to intervene militarily to protect our financial investments. Under TR, did he ever actually use his military? He only threatened to use it. But under Taft, he was forced to actually use the military to protect our financial investments. Otherwise, we would have lost all of it. Is that clear with everyone? So that's what happened there. So he actually intervenes more than TR does. And so the idea is, people ask Taft, you're doing what TR said. You can't do that. You're not good at it. I think you're wearing the wrong clothes. So the idea is suggesting that Taft was trying to be like TR. He was wearing the wrong clothes. You can't be the cowboy. You can't be the military interventionist. You're not doing it right. I don't think those clothes fit. Make sense? Okay. So, eventually, in the election of 1912, who replaces Taft? Woodrow Wilson. Landslide victory. And Woodrow Wilson becomes the 28th President of the United States, serving from 1912 to 1920. So, placeholder, Woodrow Wilson. Here are Wilson's policies. Okay, last guy to talk about today. Woodrow Wilson's foreign policy was moral diplomacy. In his foreign policy, he said, no military intervention. None. I don't want it. I didn't like it when TR did it. I especially didn't like it when Taft did it. No military intervention. Instead, he wanted America to be the ideal country. A country that does not what? A country that does not use force. He wanted an ideal country that does not use force. And instead, he said, I want our foreign policy not to be about money or greed, not to be about the military, but he wanted a foreign policy that emphasized democracy, human rights, and self-determination. He wanted a foreign policy that emphasized democracy, human rights, and self-determination. Democracy, human rights, and self-determination. Now, what is self-determination, by the way? When we're talking about countries and we say you can have self-determination, what does that mean? To have democracy, human rights, and self-determination. What does self-determination mean? It's not just motivating yourself, but being able to choose for yourself. In the context of global empires, self-determination means self-government. That's what self-determination means. It means self-government. So whenever you run across the term self-determination, it just means self-government. That are we going to force countries to choose the presidents that we like? Are we going to let countries just choose for themselves now? Under Wilson's foreign policy, that's what he wanted. Self-determination, democracy, and human rights. So he passed a few laws. The first law that was passed was the Jones Act. And the Jones Act gave Puerto Rico full citizenship. It gave Puerto Rico full citizenship. Yay. It doesn't mean they're a state, but the people have full citizenship. The people have full citizenship. They don't get states votes, though. So is that a big change? Yep. Next up, Jones Law. It can also just be called Jones Act. It doesn't matter. Just Jones and then the other Jones. with the Philippines. The Jones Law said what? That we would give the Philippines independence eventually. But we promised it. Before, the Philippines expected to be what? A colony forever, right? But under the Jones Law, we said we would give the Philippines independence eventually. Eventually, when their government was stable. Whatever that means. I think many would argue that their government isn't even stable today, but they are independent. So, give them independence eventually when their government is stable. And again, just note they are independent today, though they do have one of the most corrupt governments in the world. Because they do. Unfortunately, though, folks, you should note that despite Wilson's promise not to intervene, we did intervene in Mexico. Instead of having to know all these specific events, here's just the major idea. America sent in the military to overthrow Mexico's government. America intervened in Mexico to remove a democratically elected dictator. They sent in the military to Mexico to overthrow their government to remove a democratically elected military dictator. Again, to remove a democratically elected military dictator. Puerto. Pretty much what happened, folks, is this military dictator that was very popular with the people got elected. You know, as what happens sometimes in elections. And America was not too happy about it, so they said, no, you can't have that guy be your president. We don't like him. We don't want him to be the president of Mexico. He's very anti-American. So they sent in the military to destabilize the government so their guy could become president in a military takeover. And therefore we intervened in Mexico's democratic process. So yeah, we did that.
Was it necessary?
According to who?
Mexico?
No. I mean, it's really up to Mexicans to decide if, I mean, it's their choice. If they feel that they want that guy to be president, it's up to them. Why do we get a say in what Mexico chooses? Like, even if it wasn't necessary, it was their choice. Yes. So the first illustration is Mexico on a treadmill running towards progress, but are they getting anywhere? So this is why America said we had to intervene. Because they're running towards progress, but they're not getting anywhere, and we have to intervene, otherwise nothing's going to happen. The second one suggests that America is watching Mexico through binoculars. But those binoculars are actually what? They're cannons of a U.S. naval ship. Does that make sense? So like, yeah, we're watching you, but we're watching you with our military. And we are going to intervene whenever necessary. Cool? So, did we intervene when we said we wouldn't? Yeah. Sure. In fact, folks, Wilson intervened in Latin America more times than both Teddy Roosevelt and Taft combined.
So it only getting worse.
He did less than what he intended. He intervened in Haiti, Mexico, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Nicaragua, and Honduras. He intervened more times than both Taft and TR combined. Because of civil wars happening across. And he said, I'm doing it to promote independence and democracy. Yes, that is what you're saying, and that is what he believed, but he had to intervene more than he intended, which is unfortunate. So again, he intervened more times than Taft and TR combined in Haiti, Mexico, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Nicaragua, and Honduras. But this moral diplomacy can't last forever because while it's great to be sending our troops to these countries, eventually our troops are going to be headed elsewhere because what? World War I. You'll see the end of moral diplomacy with World War I. But again, would you argue that Wilson also had bad neighbor policy? I mean, he meant to be good, but it didn't pan out as well as he wanted. And so the end of moral diplomacy happens with the opening of WWI. World War I. And that's the end of Unit 7.